started. All right, so for our panelists, I'm going to flip a coin to see who goes first. And since I don't have a coin, I'm going to use something else. And the winner is Rick. All right,
I was going to say let Rita go first. She's more important and more interesting.
all right,
Um,
that's fine.
Rita,
Um,
you can jump in.
all right, so the first question we have is, can we require an employee to show proof that they have received the vaccine outside of work? So Rita, why don't you get us?
Okay, I'll take the first question. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Rick. It is wonderful being here. I want to say hello to some of my old friends and some new friends. I'm looking at the names as they're popping up. I'm very happy to be here. This is a critical time for employers and employees in the workplace. That statement cannot be overstated. The question of mandating vaccinations is an extremely slippery slope. And I want to advise my viewers here today and any of my clients that I will be working with in the future, before they make any decisions on this topic, to please be sure to consult with a professional or an attorney. These issues and these questions can really lead to some other issues if not done correctly. So to answer your question, Fred, can we require an employee to show proof that they have received the vaccine outside of work? We can. We can ask for proof, but that's all we really should be doing. You should not ask why they didn't get it. You should not ask if they don't have proof, what the problem is, and you should not ask any other questions other than the fact of have you been vaccinated? And the reason is when you start asking those questions, you're getting into a lot of other areas as far as health information is concerned. And if they answer you with some kind of health information, like I can't get the vaccine, I have an immune deficiency, or whatever it is that a health official is going to tell them, you're getting into the ADA. And now you know something about an employee who has not had a vaccination, you may need to accommodate. So now, with all the HIPAA regulations that we have been so intense on protecting through the years, all the health information that we have kept separate in separate files, all the information that we have advised our clients not to ask about health information, suddenly has become open game. So the answer simply is yes, you can, but not so simply. Be careful with the answer you get and the conversation that ensues that doesn't get you involved with all the other legislation that has put up in the past that an employee can take offense to and possibly litigate. So this entire conversation is going to be put around the fact that you really need to be careful to focus and stick with the facts. And
Rita, you went on mute.
I just saw that. I don't know. Somebody muted me. Anyway, I think that, Rick, if you've got something to add to
Yeah.
that, that would be my answer, to be very careful. And I think you're going to hear this from me with every question that you ask about this topic.
Yeah,
Rick?
and thank you, Rita. That's a great answer. And Rita and I will probably caveat a lot of these answers by saying, really understand. And what I would say along those lines, just to kind of take a add to the pace that Rita was going down, is that employers need to look at what kind of risk that having someone who's not vaccinated poses to their business, right? Because if you just want to ask and say, okay, you have one, the next step is, what if someone isn't vaccinated? Are we going to bring them into the office? So even just the question, as a business leader, what I would want to understand first when I'm building out a policy is understand what kind of risk someone who's not vaccinated is posing to my business, right? And then to add to Rita's point, that once you ask that question, if you ask the follow-up question, which is tell me why, right? You have, ADA is, could be religious grounds, it could be health grounds, it could be, pregnancy, safety. You're opening up a can of worms that may not be something that you're interested in. And just to kind of take it down the road, now all of a sudden you ask someone if they're vaccinated, you ask them why or why or why not you're vaccinated, and to Rita's point, now you've opened a an ADA potential issue. But if you discipline this person 3 weeks later for another unrelated reason, could that now come back and become a, I don't know, not to be, I'm not a lawyer, but some sort of retaliation claim because that employee feels that you did not, you're going after them because they're not vaccinated.
And that actually leads into the next question is, can we ask for or survey employees about whether they plan to get vaccinated or not?
You want me to
Rick,
take?
you want to take that?
Okay, I'll take that. So the answer is yes, right? And like in a lot of HR things, we can ask as long as we're applying it consistently to all employees and across the board, right? So the answer is yes, but then the follow-up thought to me is, what are you going to do with that information and why is it important to your business? So for instance, if we're going to publish to our clients that 98% of our employees are vaccinated, okay, maybe that's one reason. But if we're just using that for internal purposes, again, I think we have to be careful with what the answer is, because if someone says no, and to use the example that I just gave a little bit earlier, which was now I may feel retaliated against or ostracized or whatever those things may be because I chose not to be vaccinated for whatever my reasons are, right? I think that employers need to make sure that as they're going down these paths, if they decide to, that they speak to someone like Rita who understands how to apply these things and what's behind door number 18 that you may not be thinking about.
Well said, Rick. I just want to follow up, and I think I will be reiterating some of the things you said. Why are you asking that question? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking of putting a mandatory vaccination policy in place? And so therefore you're asking your employees if they got vaccinated. The follow-up question to somebody saying no should never be, why not? That is going to lead you to the areas to question number one. They're going to have to tell you, or may not want to tell you, but some employees will. Why not? And it could be medical. It could be psychological. It could be anything that's none of your business. And therefore, if you're thinking of it and you want to put a mandatory vaccination policy in place, remember that the CDC and the regs say that it should be a business necessity. It should be a reason that there's a direct threat to your other employees, and it should be job related. Those are 3 criteria for mandating a vaccination. And there you go again with a very slippery slope. And as I said, and you're going to get tired of hearing me say it, is it's a slippery slope. You're going to get into health issues. You're going to get into the ADA. You're going to get into the EEOC. You're going to get into discrimination issues. So fast answer, Fred. Okay, you can ask the question, but be very careful what you do with the answers that are coming back.
Right? It's sort of like, be careful of what you wish for.
Very good.
Yeah, there was a question that was posed here, and it probably relates to some of the other things that I'm going to have coming up. But somebody asked, what are the ramifications if you don't ask, or you don't ask the employees if they've been vaccinated? So if you play dumb, it's like, I'm not even going to go there. Are there risks there as well? Rita, why don't you start us off?
Okay, I think I could answer that. If you don't ask, and you don't have to, as long as you're following the CDC and the OSHA general duty issues that they're telling you to provide your employees in the workplace, You are giving them as much protection as you can as an employer by making sure all the forms are filled out before they walk in. And believe me, the CDC laws are changing by the hour. So OSHA and all of those preliminary issues have to be followed. Wearing masks, staying 6 feet apart, having people work remotely, washing hands, being careful. If you don't ask, as long as you're following the other issues that keep your employees safe, you will not have a problem letting them know if there's somebody in the office that has been in direct contact, and being very careful not to divulge that person's name. That's another thing you have to be careful with. You will not run into any issues as long as when any of the health authorities come in, should there be a complaint, you have followed all of those health parameters that have been set out for us, just as I just explained. So the only issue you would have is if you're not following those rules and regulations, and you get somebody from the health department or the CDC, whoever is going to come in, to take a look at what you're doing in the office to keep your employees safe. Rick, is there anything you want to add to that? But that would be my slant on not asking.
Yeah, I agree with the slant, exactly what you just said. And I'm going to add, from an employer's practical perspective, and this may seem shameless plug, but last Monday I was in a Newsday article being asked about these exact things. And kind of my response there, and my response in addition to what Rita said was, I think that the first thing that an employer needs to have is a COVID plan, right? A COVID business plan. So we've been, doing this with a lot of our clients the past year or so that every contingency is thought about and laid out, right? How they're going to respond. It could be everything from, how we're going to set up the office and the desks to what if we have an exposure? What if we have a contact trace? What are we going to do? All the different contingencies. And this should really be this question, those that are and are not getting vaccinated should be part of that actual plan, because really the best thing to do is to step away from it, we think, and not be in the mandating of the vaccination business. But if for whatever reason you are, or your business is, that you should have a plan that you're responding to, so you respond the exact same way every time to try to avoid any issues. And that plan should be something that every employee knows about before they walk into that office and come back to that office. So I think that consistency and having a plan developed out will eliminate many of these things, and it's probably the best way to handle it. You should have a plan regardless if you're mandating vaccines, because businesses have to respond to COVID. So having that written plan, how you're going to reacting the same way every time to each situation, and the employees understand that, is an important step.
All right. There was a question that was posed, and it actually leads into a couple of the things that we're talking about as far as, what are the best practices if we plan, should we plan to provide vaccines or access to the vaccines, and whether or not implementing them to be mandatory. The question was, if employers require a vaccine and an employee gets injured from the vaccine, is it true that the employer can be sued? And one area, as we've been talking about, when we get into health issues or health questions, it opens up like a Pandora's box. One of the things the CDC has not come away yet and approved are people who suffer from allergic reactions or allergies, extreme allergies. So can you help us in regards to that? If we do have a COVID plan, or we require people to get vaccinated, and there are medical issues and that person gets injured, what happens?
There's the can of worms. There you go. If you're mandating vaccinations, the first thing I would tell you is to be sure to get a third party to do that. You're not going to want to do that on site. You're not going to want to do that in your office. Why is that? Well, everyone who is mandating, and I myself have been fully vaccinated, and I stood in front of a CVS store and I walked up to this table set out in the middle of nowhere with people around 6 feet apart and being asked medical questions before I got my shot in the middle of everything. You don't want to be responsible of asking those questions and then having other people hear the answers in your office. There's just no way that I would ever recommend that an employer take the responsibility to administer it themselves. It should be a third party. And if you have employees that don't want to take it for medical reasons, don't want to take it for psychological reasons, don't want to take it for religious reasons, they will need to sign a waiver. And the waiver is going to also have information on it that is none of your business as an employer. And that is one thing that you have to worry about, mandating a vaccination, whether it's third party or not. Because if you're mandating it and this person doesn't want to take it for the reasons I just described, what are you doing? Is that person being terminated from employment because they don't want to take the vaccine? Is that person a minority or a religious problem or any medical problem? It opens the door for the litigation of these employees saying, I lost my job because, and that is the one reason that I brought up the fact that Florida has just enacted and effective March 29th, the Employer Protection Act that is going to protect the employer for liability protection for any COVID-related issues. And everything I just described, from the waiver that is going to give out information that you don't need to know, is all food for thought for a lawsuit for someone who is now going to be denied access. And you better know how you're going to deny the access for those reasons, because that's all going to be a liability that can be put upon the employer. So again, be very careful. And again, remember that I said that if you're going to mandate, it should be a business necessity. It should be a direct threat to your people, and it should be job related. Do we want everyone to be vaccinated? In a real world, it's a wonderful thing. But think about what I'm saying. If you're asking these questions and you know what rumors go around an office, and it's just looking for a lot of issues that you should be prepared to answer before you make that decision.
Rick, do you want to have anything?
Yeah, I'll add to that a little bit. And I think that Rita shared with me this morning about Governor DeSantis's decision. I think we should expect that to become more and more a part of new legislation and acted, at the federal. I know in the last couple of PPP discussions or CARES Act type of things that was a part of it. So I think that will do that. But I think this question, I think Rita started with this, my sentiments exactly, which is this is exactly why you don't want to be in the mandating of vaccination business in case someone gets hurt. But just to kind of add something, from March of last year till about October, when the testing became readily available, you can walk in and get it anywhere free. And remember those first 5-6 months, and getting a test was a big deal. We brought in a third party to many of our clients to do on-site PCR tests and other things. And what we did in those instances, we had every employee, we did over 10,000 tests. We had employees sign a limited HIPAA waiver, right? Do you have COVID? Yes or no? And I think a lot of us, when we do the temperature check and all that kind of stuff, we should be signing a limited HIPAA waiver if we're doing any of that stuff for our people. But in this case, right? And I think this is where Rita was, I'd like to, kind of expand upon that. If someone has is not going to take the vaccination because of other reasons, some other disability, some, pregnancy, religious thing, or something along those lines. There's no way for us to get a limited HIPAA waiver for just, are you COVID positive or are you COVID negative? So I think that in this instance, this question is beautiful because it really highlights why we don't want to be in that mandating business. So there's the lawsuit aspect that it's part of the heart of the question. But I think the other part of the question is, what do we do with those employees when we find out something that we shouldn't, and how do we manage that? And it's probably an impossible Pandora's box at this point in time to manage.
An add-on to that, or an extension of it, is how would you handle an employee who doesn't want to come back to working in the office because others may not have been vaccinated and they perceive it as a safety risk to them coming into an office where people are not vaccinated? How do you handle that quandary?
Rita, you want to jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Rick. You start.
Okay.
You want to take
Um,
that?
Yeah, I think again there has to be, within reason, a reason why they're not coming back, and potentially a reasonable accommodation if that's the case, right? Um, if someone just says, boy, I really rather not get on the train and go to Manhattan, take 2 hours out of my day each way, I'm going to say I don't want to come in, right? I've been working fine. I think that's a different place. And in cases where there's not a reasonable accommodation, that could be, reason to end employment. But I think that, the just saying that you're afraid of something is not really going to work because you say other people are not vaccinated. Go ahead, Rita, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I've gotten that question many, many times. We have clients all over Long Island. I have retainer clients and we have hourly clients, and I am getting that question on a daily basis, quite frankly. Look, people are afraid. And if you remember a year ago, it was a whole lot different than it is today. Employers have taken the precautions. They have followed the CDC guidelines. They have created deep cleaning in their companies. They have created all of the procedures that the CDC has put into effect. They have accommodated remote. And now they're deciding, okay, this is safe. We have the procedures in place. We're wearing our masks. I need to bring people back. Unless these people, and let's not forget what pre-COVID rules and regulations were. You have an office, you have a business you need to run. If you've taken all of the aspects of a risk out of the office of coming in, if this person does not have a medical or religious issue for not returning to work, childcare issues are another. If all of those areas have been explored and everyone is coming back to work and this employee cannot and will not return to work, we need to go to the disciplinary actions of if that employee was even working in the office. We need this person back. It's a hardship on the company. Again, I would definitely recommend you work with a professional on this so that the documentation is in place that puts you in the right order of saying you must come back to work. You have no medical issue. You have no physical issue. You have no religious issue. You're just afraid. That is not the employer's problem. If there's no other documentation, this person just does not want to come to work. Their job is getting in the way of their life. We have to reevaluate it. Remote work is not possible. Some people decide they want to stay remote since they've been out for a year, but the company said, no, I want the entire company back. So you need to set the precedent that if everybody's coming back, why are you now allowing one person to work remote because of fear. Discrimination issues come into play. So that could wind up as a disciplinary issue, but it's got to be walk the walk, find out exactly what the problem is, and walk it through to the point where either the employee needs to decide to terminate his or her employment, or the employer needs to decide that too. But of course, that's not without a lot of investigation, a lot of documentation, being very careful, putting the employer in a position where they won't be litigated, and going forward with the right path. Because if you don't, you'll have all your employees running your business and working where they want, when they want, and how they want. You really need to be sure you're within the safety parameters, that it's safe for them to come back, vaccinated or not. And that's what you want. Again, documentation, investigation, being sure the employee will be safe upon return and that they can come back to work. And if they don't want to, then the employer makes the decision of where they're going, whether they want to come back or not, because at some point it could be called job abandonment. They're just not coming back to a job that is now safe. Everybody is back, and they are required to report to work.
I'm not sure if
A
everybody
little bit
realizes.
off the subject of what we're talking about, but an important question.
No, definitely. Hopefully the audience is realizing there's been one key phrase that has been said throughout this whole presentation, and it's documentation. All right. So from what I'm hearing is that not only do you need to have a good plan, a well thought out plan, speak to the advisors like our panelists, but to also have that very detailed documentation that you can fall back on, all right, to substantiate your policies, your procedures, and what you're going through. Can our panelists kind of share their thoughts in regards to what type of documentation people need to have or create to help protect themselves in this very, what I'm going to say is volatile or up and down roller coaster period that we're going through as far as coming back to work in COVID vaccines?
Yeah, I could take that. I think that, you know, and let me digress a second. Rita and I see every day, right? And let's just use the regular old-fashioned employee handbook as an example. That employers have it, they put it in their desk, they never look at it again, and they make mistakes by doing that every day. And the simplest mistake is Fred comes into me and I'm in a great mood that day, and he says, I need an extra week off. And I go, sure, Fred, you're great. I love you. Take the day off, right? Then someone else walks into the office the next day. John Hill walks in. I'm in a bad mood. And he says, I need some more time off. I said, John, you kidding me? We're trying to run a business here. What are we doing? And just by not using that document as a living, breathing document, I've just created, some sort of problem for myself. So I think with the COVID response plan, there needs to be with employees a specific communication platform, right? Communication plan, which is, hey, we're going to return to work. Why are we returning to work, right? What are the things that we're going to do to keep us healthy, safe? Here are the CDC guidelines. Here are the OSHA guidelines, as Rita mentioned earlier. But also, here is a policy, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, a COVID policy. So almost think like a mini handbook that really lays out all of the things that we as a business are going to do in as many situations as we can think of. Now, this is a pretty sophisticated document. It has a lot of detail, and it's somewhat changing every day because we're getting new guidance every day. But you want to have something that you can, as a business leader, refer to, so that if we have a contact trace issue, let's just say, we know we're going to respond this way. And if it happens again in 3 weeks, we're going to respond the exact same way, right? So that we're not creating any discriminatory patterns or anything like that. Wait, we didn't close down the office when Johnny was was contact traced, but we're closing it down now that I'm contact traced. So having a written plan that all employees know, they can expect what the employer is going to do, how they're going to respond, much like a handbook, I think is an important first step. And that communication process, there's a, return to work check policy. There's, the who, what, why, where, when letter that should go out and say, we're coming back. Here's why we're coming back. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's when we're going to do it. So a formal communication policy and an extremely formal written policy that is used to respond to issues would be my best advice.
That was well said, Rick. I'd just like to add about documentation, because very often, and I think the handbook is absolutely necessary, because the handbook will keep you consistent and history. If you're not consistent and fair in human resources, you're going to get into trouble. However, here's a question I get an awful lot. My employee just said that he or she cannot come back to work because of some kind of an illness related to this. And the doctor said that there's a risk for them coming, I'm making this up, for them coming back to work because there's a risk of COVID and they have an immune deficiency, yada, yada. Well, my rule of thumb is, okay, I feel for this employee, but never take the word of the employee. You need physician documentation. You don't want to know what the problem is, but if the employee is saying, I can't come back for the next month, you want the physician documentation to say this employee cannot come back for another month. You cannot take the word of the employee. You need the documentation. You need to know that this is real, because then that'll put you on the next road of either applying for FIC or disability, paid family leave, whatever. Nothing happens unless you get that official documentation. If there's some kind of an employee issue, if there's an employee situation where they're not coming back for other reasons than medical, and then you're making all these reasonable accommodations until they can come back, everything you do should be documented. Susie is not coming back. She's working remote, extended remote for the next 2 weeks. Whatever you're doing should be documented, because you don't know at the end of that road what Susie's going to do and say to you, I'm not coming back forever. I decided not to. You're going to need to prove you've made all these reasonable accommodations, that you've done everything you've had to do to accommodate this employee. And now, after all of that, he or she is not coming back to the office. If you don't write it down in a court of law, it did not happen. So the documentation for everything and every situation, which is, I'll get 10 calls today and each call will be different. Each situation will be different, but we document what we're saying, what we're doing. The physician everything is very necessary to lead you to the step of either termination, and you don't just pull the trigger on termination. You need documentation. Fred, very good question. That is a very important part of human resources. So if you can only remember that, is to, even if you're putting an incident diary, jotting things down, because I will always say it's time for a performance improvement plan. What have you got? And my clients will say, well, although my clients now know they better jot things down. I need the facts. Facts will set you free. So documentation, if you don't write it down and you can't prove it, it didn't happen.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. That was very informative. And for people who are using services that are offered by Rita and Rick, they understand that. And the reason why the LISB does this is because there are a lot of small business people out there who may not have access to these resources. So this definitely helps them along the way. And if you do not have those kind of policies or that employee handbook, and as Rick pointed out, it is a live and breathing document. And in COVID, with all of the changes that are going on, it changes, and you need to adapt to those changes in order to help you, your organization, and not only protect yourself, but also protect your employees and your clients that may be coming in to visit you. There was a question, and again, because COVID is a living, breathing thing that is changing, and we've seen it change, how many variants come up and things of that nature. But the question was asked, how do we deal with that, all right? Because the vaccines were all approved basically to try to get this country back up and running again, emergency approvals and things of that nature. And we're still learning things about the vaccine and its variants. So if somebody has an issue with that or is afraid to go back into the office due to those kind of concerns, I think it's your answers may be repetitive. You may have already addressed this,
Yeah.
but how do we as owners or HR people take that into consideration as far as making sure our policies are airtight or we're at least covering them? So Rita, would you like to start that?
Well, the laws are changing on an hourly basis. There's no doubt about that. If you don't have HR help, such as my firm, who provides it on an hourly retainer, whatever business my clients are calling on a regular basis every day. The PPE, the FICRA, all of these laws are changing. If I have your question correct, Fred, we as HR professionals are tuning in every morning to see what has changed. So how is the average small business supposed to know that? They don't. They don't know what they don't know. And it's a very challenging time, and it's very sad. That's why we offer as much help as we can to let them know what they don't know and put it into place. What I would recommend to small business, if they don't have this kind of help, is to be sure, and those people out there now, Rick and I are available to give us a call, because you can't get into a situation that may be litigated tomorrow. And again, tomorrow, they can change the law that today they put into place. Things become effective and ineffective overnight. I would recommend that a small business, if they don't have the resources such as a Portnoy or Rick, Google every day to see what the particular, and years ago we didn't have that option, but we do have it now. But even that I don't trust, because I'm not sure that some of the information online is up to date. Reading and if you're owner of a small business, it's your responsibility to keep up to date. And if your employee is throwing you a curve, find a professional, find an attorney, and get the right answers if you feel that they are going up that path to sue you.
Very good.
Yeah, I would add again a little bit of self-promotion. I was interviewed on a New York City radio program last Tuesday, and the question was exactly about this, and really, the answer is that if you're going to be in business, you have to be up on this stuff, whether it's you or someone else that does it, right? So employers down to one employee, and I see in the chat box someone referencing a small pizzeria, it's just as important that small pizzeria have the same kind of policies and procedures, right? Just like a restaurant would follow the Department of Health guidelines, they need to follow the Department of Labor guidelines as well. So I think that having policies and procedures, when they're written properly, actually makes your life easier and your business grow and scale quicker, right? Because you're not chasing and putting out fires. It's strategic, right? So I think that money really shouldn't be an issue. And I say it in this way: there are resources, as Rita laid out, right? So doing it yourself could be a lot less expensive than calling Rita or myself, or it could be a lot more expensive, right? So you really need to think about that as you're building your business, and having the right resources in place. As Rita mentioned, she's could be built out on an hourly basis. So having the right resource for the right amount of time ultimately is the right price. And the bigger picture is there is a tsunami of laws, rules, and regulations waiting to come down on us, right? So I always give the example. Remember, a couple of years ago, New York State implemented mandatory New York State sexual harassment training, right? mandated that a model policy should be most likely in your handbook, right? And it was mandated on these things. Now, just think about this past year, right? Remember when we were talking about, it was in the news every day, right? And it still is with some folks in the news, and unfortunately, that's the case, and it shouldn't be. But think about all the social unrest. Think about the FFCRA and the CARES Act, and all of these things that have been enacted and become part of our lives, PPE and PPP and all that sort of stuff, EIDL. We expect that over the next 12 to 18 months, states in particular and federal governments are going to be implementing laws, rules, and regulations that you may not be aware of, but you will be held accountable to. So you want to have a professional, again, right resource, right time, right price that can guide you. And if it's done properly, it'll help your business scale and grow quicker, and you can sleep at night.
Thank you very much. I think everybody, as far as in business, and you put it very nicely, that especially a small business owner, you wear many hats, and most of the time your day-to-day is putting out fires. You don't want to be reactionary to certain things. So if you're a business and you're hiring employees, yeah, you have a banker, you have a business lawyer. It should also be recommended, because you have employees, that you also have an HR advisor, because again, there are so many daggone rules and regulations related to, as Rick said, sexual harassment. And the things we're dealing with in terms of COVID right now, they are going to change. Right now, as Rita said, Florida put in something that said, fine, businesses are safe, all right, liability against businesses due to COVID issues. That could all change based on the federal government, who supersedes who, those kind of things. So I know as a small business owner, I don't have the time nor the resources, the energy to think of all of these little things. It is best to either find those resources, and even if you do, like Rita said, what is factual today may not be tomorrow. So yes, you can go online and see information, but you may also want to take advantage of a resource like Rita or Rick for that occasional, even if it's like, listen, take a look at my policies, take a look at my procedures. Do I have everything right? What do I need? And then move on from there. All right. So we're coming to the end of our discussion here. I don't have anything else unless Rita and Rick, you want to have some closing comments or advice for us. There is one other thing. If there are resources that a small business owner can access, if the two of you know of any of those resources, could you share those links with us, and we'll provide them on our website to the people here. Again, you can Google this kind of stuff and go see it, the CDC and things of that nature. But as far as policies and things that may change that affect you on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure there are some keen resources that the two of you know about that maybe you can share with the audience and share with our members.
I'll jump in. So what I would say on that question, because I do get asked that all the time, and it's going to sound snarky, and it's not meant to be, but we've all probably gone on WebMD one time or another in our lives, and we have a headache. We go on WebMD, and in about 15 minutes, we're calling all of our family and friends because we're dying, and we have a brain tumor, and we know it because WebMD says it, right? And this is kind of the same thing, right? It's, if you're not in it every day, if you don't have the context, if you don't have the background, if you don't have the training, reading some of these things may seem one way, but actually be another. So just in my case, if someone needs some help, if someone has a question, call. I'm sure Rita feels the same way. Call. We'll help you out, right? That's the purpose. But the one thing I would like to add, a question that did not come up, that does get asked quite often, is, can I tell clients whether my employees are vaccinated or not, right? And that's something that needs to be done real careful, because some people say, hey, I'm going to get everyone vaccinated, and I'm going to tell everyone, because we're an accounting firm, come to us, all our people are vaccinated, right? That may not work, right? Or may put you in a little bit of hot water. However, if you're in a business where health is an important thing, let's say a home health agency, that might be something that's very important. So the next, that question comes up quite often. So if you're thinking about telling your clients that your staff and team are vaccinated, we should have that discussion as to why or how are you going to use that information, because it could create a bit of hot water. So then my final comment is, I got to spend a lot of time preparing for this meeting with Rita. And, although we may seem on the surface to be competitors, I got to tell you, I was so honored to chat with her so many different times and to learn from her. She's an unbelievable resource, and I think that everyone in the LIASB should consider and put in their Rolodex. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Rick. I really appreciate that. And there are no competitors in this world. We're all in this together, and we learn from each other every single day. And I sat with one of our attorneys to be brushed up on what we're talking about today, who, by the way, is learning every day with me. So thank you for that, Rick. I absolutely appreciate it. And I do feel the pain of our small businesses out there right now. We do share it, and I would never mind any of you giving me a call, even after this. If you think about it, I can be reached at 516-921-3400. I'll be very happy to follow up with you and answer any of your questions. Rick and I have been in this business for a very long time. Our antennae go very far out. You have OSHA issues, you have benefit issues. The one thing that a good HR professional can provide you is resources for the wonderful people we have met along the way that help us do our job. And yes, to go to the can a client ask you if your employees have been vaccinated? Just to go back to the topic that we're on right now. Be very careful. I'll leave you with that word. If you haven't heard it for the 100th time during this presentation, this is a very slippery slope. My clients hate when I use those words, slippery slope, but that's what HR is. You need to be on the side of the law. You need to have documentation, and you need to be very careful with the information your employees give to you. So it's been my pleasure today to be here. And I want to thank you, Fred, for hosting, and Rick, an honor to be with you as well. And again, please don't hesitate to give us a call if we can help in any way.
Very good. Thank you very much, everybody. Before we go, what I'd like to do is I'm going to share my screen real quick and just kind of show you where you can find all this information later. Right now, you would go to the LISB website, and under resources, recorded events, it will be posted here, as all of our previous events have been posted. If you are a member, you can click on the little icon up here to log in with your username and password, or a guest. You can request a 30-day pass to the content that's on the website. So please utilize this. Every single month we have new content coming up. It's always going to be posted here for your availability. So with that, I want to thank our panel for providing us with some very useful information. And again, this I think has helped a lot of people and will help a lot of people. And again, if you have a question, please reach out to Rick or Rita. Let them guide you the right way. All right. With that, I want to wish everybody to have a great Thursday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your lunch and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Guys, you were great.
Thank you.